Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar on active management of driver fatigue. Firstly, I want to say a huge thank you to the sponsors of today's event, AutoSense. We wouldn't be able to run our webinars and other events without the support of corporate partners like them. If you're new to our webinars, we run them as part of our Global Fleet Champions campaign, and it's a campaign that's administered by Brake, the road safety charity, to prevent deaths and injuries and pollution caused by vehicles being driven for work. If you want to learn more about the work that we do and to access fleet safety resources and more events, then you can head to our website, globalfleetchampions.org. But please note that from early next year, we will have a new Brake website going live, and we'll be moving our fleet information to that site, the brake.org.nz website as well. Brake as an organisation is a road safety charity working to prevent road deaths and injuries, make communities safer and support people bereaved and injured in crashes through a range of initiatives, including our events, awards and resources for fleet professionals. We also run activities such as Road Safety Week in New Zealand, Beep Beep Days for young children, and we provide free support resources to people who've been bereaved in crashes. And at the end of the webinar, I'll mention a couple of forthcoming initiatives that we have as well. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first of today's speakers. We've got three fantastic speakers joining us today for this really important topic of fatigue. So I'm delighted to introduce Charles Dawson. As CEO of AutoSense, Charles drives the organisation's focus on delivering trusted, high-quality solutions that create safer journeys for all road users. He's a strong advocate for smarter technology, better training and data-driven insights that support fleets to make meaningful, lasting improvements in safety. So we're really grateful to have Charles here today and to AutoSense for sponsoring this webinar. Thanks, Charles.
Well, thank you very much, Caroline, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here today and to be supporting Brake. We really respect what Caroline and Brake do in the community, and I guess our job's to try and mean that you don't have a job, Caroline, at some stage, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your day to come along today, and hopefully what I guess the three speakers today have to talk to you about will assist you in working with your organisations to really reduce the critical risk that we see. So I'm just going to share my screen there. Hopefully this comes through. Amazing, actually worked. That's great. So I wanted to start today by going through just some of the stats and the figures that we know about. So AutoSense has been distributing Guardian by Seeing Machines for 12, 13 odd years, and we obviously record all of the statistics that we get, and I think sometimes we see them so often and watch people falling asleep so often that we almost become a little bit blasé. So it's quite good to kind of run back through and just have a look at what the state of the nation is out there. Now, keeping in mind the majority of for our Australian listeners, the majority of the Guardian stats that I'll talk about today are New Zealand based, but I think a similar pattern runs into. So figures from WorkSafe show that 28% of all work-related fatalities come from vehicle incidents across the whole of industry in New Zealand. So 28% of the people that die every year happen, or that crash is what causes it on the road. When we look at the transport and warehousing sector, I guess somewhat logically that figure lifts, but it's quite significant to 82% of all work-related facilities occur in or around a motor vehicle in that space. So it really is a critical risk. When WorkSafe has done some research in this area, what we find is 28% of transport workers find themselves often fatigued, and 9% of truck and 7% of bus serious crashes are caused by fatigue. Now, I think that this figure is wildly underrepresented. very few people come out of a crash and sort of go, oh, gee, I fell asleep. So you do hear it sometimes, but generally either the driver doesn't want to admit that, or in fact, very, very often, because of the nature of the impairment that comes from fatigue, they probably don't actually realize that that is what's actually caused it. And we know, of course, and Kat will talk about this later in the webinar, but less than 7 hours of sleep or doing any sort of shift work really does make that crash risk much higher. So AutoSense has around about 6,200 odd Guardian units installed across New Zealand, with some in Australia and a couple in Fiji. Every day we wake up 53 drivers. So that's a situation where a driver has actually fully fallen asleep, essentially dribbling on the steering wheel, and we've actually identified that and woken them up. And the scary thing is that would fill a large city bus. It's more people than are on this webinar right at this moment. And that happens every day, 7 days a week, 365 days in the year. And one of the things, we have seen that drop slightly over the past 5 or so years, but in my mind, that is not dropping anywhere near fast enough. We want to get into a situation where we're really very rarely having to wake people up. We talk a lot about fatigue, but we also must mention distraction. So 162 human verified distraction events every day, and in 38 of these 162 events, we are able to identify a cell phone in a driver's hand. So their distraction has been caused because of a mobile device in that space, which, can I remind you, is in fact illegal. So I talked earlier of not seeing a lot of reduction in the number of people that we are waking up every year or every day. And this leads us into, I guess, kind of a new concept that we've been working on for a little while, which is moving from reactive fatigue management to active fatigue management. So by active, we mean really intervening much earlier in the process of someone becoming impaired, so that in the end, we're not having to wake them up just before they crash. Because, look, it's hard enough to drive out there as it is, let alone trying to drive vehicles, especially large trucks, when we're actually asleep at the wheel. The European Union has realised this, and a new EU, what they call a General Safety Rule, or a GSR, came in on the 7th of July in 2024, and that has been further updated this July. The regulation was that back in 24, was all M and N class vehicles must include what we call DDoR, or driver drowsiness attention warning. So that's a system that recognises when a driver is becoming impaired, hopefully well before they fall asleep, and gives them a warning in that space. So that addition meant that Seeing Machines, and through their OEM technology, began to develop an impairment algorithm. That impairment algorithm is now available on all Guardian units, and in fact, the majority of our Generation 2 units, and of course all of our Generation 3 units, are now running that impairment algorithm. And we have been doing some trial work with it. We had a fleet that volunteered to be part of a small study in July of this year. That fleet was sort of between 50 and 100 vehicles, and had trucks running essentially 24/7 a day. What we did was we ran a baseline, so we essentially detected when drivers became impaired, and I'll explain shortly how we do that, but we didn't run any alerts to those drivers. So what we saw is that fleet had around about 17 what we call microsleep events, so where we've actually had to wake the driver up, and at least 50% of those microsleeps were preceded by at least one DDoR event within 30 minutes. So essentially, we were able to detect when that driver was becoming impaired, And that meant, of course, that if we were able to then start to intervene, which we did in the months of August and September, through education of the drivers and also by turning on the driver alerts, we were able to achieve a 57% reduction in sleep events. So the sleep events dropped from around that 17 or 18 in July through down into around about 7 for the month of August and September. So that was a really good result, and it proved that if you could intervene when a driver was just in the impaired state, you would therefore be able to prevent the majority of those microsleep or sleep events later on. There were some other interesting findings within that piece of research, and what we found was that 3 drivers, in fact, accounted for 56% of all the fatigue events detected. So there were 3 drivers that had various health issues and the sorts of things that Kat dealt with through sleep testing, that sort of thing. And that meant we were able to massively reduce their fatigue events, and that had a big drop in terms of the wider fleet fatigue side of things as well. Also in anecdotal research, speaking with all of those drivers, we did find that their knowledge around fatigue and sleep had really improved, and the sorts of things that they could do about that. So what practical steps can you and your drivers take? So it's all very well being able to identify when someone is becoming impaired, but as they always say, the show must go on, and the vehicles must still get to where they're going. So one of the things that we are able to provide drivers with is education around when they do find themselves in that impaired space. We can really reinforce that only sleep actually rests the brain. So at the end of the day, the human must have at least that 7 hours sleep a day. And if they are seriously impaired, really only a NASA nap, a 26-minute nap will make a lasting difference. However, we can use some boosts to hide that tiredness for a short time, and Kat will talk a bit more about these later on in her slide deck there. But certainly there are a number of factors that drivers can actually use, and once they have been identified in that space. So how do we actually understand what state a driver is in from an impairness point of view? So in the 1990s, there was a scale called the Karolinska Sleepiness Scale developed, and it was a self-reporting scale that ran from 1 to 9. And as you can see here on the screen, if you were to circle a 1, that would mean that you were in an extremely alert state. Fantastic. If you were to have it a circle a 7, an 8, or a 9, that you would be moving into a very impaired state. What Guardian does is it looks at around about 2 minutes worth of rolling footage and uses a whole lot of signs and symptoms to identify where the driver sits on that. The ability for it to do this is all tested back against the EU standards. And what we see that's really interesting here is that Guardian starts to identify and tell the driver they're in that impaired state when they move from a 7 on the KSS to an 8. However, if you look at the 7, the line for 7, what we can see there is that we're having around about 8 cognitive lapses per 10 minutes. So a cognitive lapse is when the brain switches off for a moment. So we've all had that moment of vagueness when we've been, say, driving along and can't really remember what we've just passed on the road. Essentially, this is when the brain is shutting down for a momentary time. You can see at a KSS 7, we're having cognitive lapses of between 0.5 and 1.5 seconds. And it also compares this, that you can see on the red circle on the right, that we are able to compare that impairment to that of the breath alcohol level. So, and those of you that watch Motorway Patrol will see that 0.05 is in fact the limit at which you have to go and sit in the police car. So if we're sitting at around about that 7, we will be in a space of being impaired to that level of being in an illegal point of space to drive a vehicle. Once we move into 8 or 9, then it's getting really scary in that space. And in the in the case of our trial fleet, in fact, their drivers drove, as I said, between 50 and 100 vehicles. Their drivers drove for over 2,000 kilometres in a KSS state of 8 or above, 8 or 9. So really quite an amazing amount of driving to do in a heavy truck when essentially over the legal limit of alcohol. The other thing that is quite scary is that when we are seeing cognitive lapses of 1.2 seconds or more, we are finding that at least half of those, or around about half of those, flip a coin, are done, those cognitive lapses occur with the eyes open. So if you think reactive sleep systems create that event when we have the eyes closed, well, half of these cognitive lapses are in fact happening with the eyes open. So quite scary. And we have seen a number of crash events where the driver's just gone off the road, but their eyes were open the whole time there. So really quite scary. So I mentioned around about 3,200 of our units are now running the impairment algorithm. We're seeing 30,000 DDoR events in a month, and that's over the year so far, and something like 40% across that wider fleet of sleep events are preceded by a DDoR event there, and we're getting around about 2.5 of those DDoR events per sleep event. So we are going to roll that study and have a number of fleets participating in that. So to achieve active fatigue management, we need that awareness, we need those alerts, we need engineering solution in the vehicle, but we also need the business to be running this active fatigue system. And that really comes back to making sure that your safe driving policy really does reflect the elements of an active fatigue management system. And we're spending a lot of time these days helping fleets to actually have a look at their safe driving policy and really ensure that those key elements are in that policy. And these are the sort of areas that we're looking at in that space. So policy is really going to help us along the health and safety side. It's going to help us drive change. And for those directors out there and officers of the company, obviously with critical risk being so important these days, safe driving policy is going to help us in that space. One of the things that we all know is something like 80% of us feel that we're a better driver than the person sitting next to us at any time. And I think it's really important to get a bit of an understanding of why that is. And I've got a short video next of our Ambassador Greg Murphy talking with our cognitive neuroscientist, Nathan Wallace, that'll hopefully give us a bit of an understanding in that space as well.
It's not going
So there we go. Basically what Nathan was saying there is that that because so many of us have done all these things for so long and never had a problem, we end up with the bias of having 100% success. And it's a bias that at some point Lady Luck runs out, and of course that's when we have a crash. Well, that's all I've got, folks. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hand you back to Caroline.
That's great. Thanks very much, Charles. Those were some really useful insights in there too. I have seen a chat message. I think one or two people couldn't hear the video. It will be on the recording though, so you will be able to hear it through that. But it is basically talking about these things that Charles mentioned there too. So we will move straight along to our next speaker. And so our next speaker this afternoon is Michael Wallace. Michael is the head of product for the aftermarket division at Seeing Machines, bringing more than 20 years experience across technology, software, and high-tech innovation. He's a passionate product leader who balances customer needs with product integrity to deliver solutions that make a real difference. Michael has been at Seeing Machines for over 3 years and is responsible for managing all of the Guardian products, including Guardian Live. And his role is to look at the market, industry, and safety trends and to set the development roadmap, not only for what features should go into current products, but also for what the future strategy should look like as well. So today we'll hear a little bit about both, what's out there now and what might happen in the future as well. So I'll hand over to you, Michael.
No worries. Thanks, Caroline. I'll just bring out my slides. Excellent. It is a great pleasure to be able to talk to you all today. I know in the UK, Seeing Machines does support Break at some of their events here, so it's I'm really pleased that I can be involved with the events that you're hosting here, Caroline. So today I'm going to talk about how we're using our Guardian technology to basically facilitate what Charles has talked about in terms of active fatigue management, and how we can help to sort of bring changes to driver behaviour much earlier than just being reactive. I'll start a little bit talking about Seeing Machines because people may not know who we are, but so Seeing Machines has been around for 20 years, almost 25 years now, and we are very science and research based. So the company spawned out of the Australian National University, so we have a very strong scientific and regulation and research background, and it drives everything that we do, which is to aim for zero transport fatalities. We want to get everyone home safety. Our sole purpose is safety, and we use that science and research background to help with that. Our technology is in around 4 million vehicles worldwide, so it covers both aftermarket and some OEM work that we do, and we've accumulated over 20 billion kilometres of sort of travel time with that technology. So some key brands that we work with, as I mentioned, so I work in the aftermarket space, but there's a large part of our business works with OEMs and tier one suppliers to provide our core technology into the road vehicles that people may be driving around with today. We also do a lot of work in the aviation industry, both dealing with pilots and fatigue and distraction, also training. So we use our core gaze tracking algorithm to help identify where pilots might be looking in certain situations and comparing good pilots versus less experienced pilots. We also do the same thing with air traffic controllers, where we extend that to looking at cognitive load of those people as well. And we also do get involved with Euro NCAP. So we have a voice at Euro NCAP. We do help set some of the standards and regulations, and we get involved with industry broadly. But the core technologies and algorithms that we use in Guardian are the same technologies and algorithms that we're using across all of these OEMs and in the aviation sector as well. It all comes from the same place. It's just we're applying it in a different way. And I think that's really important to understand that you might be getting Guardian, it's an aftermarket product, but it is leveraging what we learn from OEMs and those regulations that Charles touched on in terms of not only just the GSR but Euro NCAP and things like that. So what is Guardian? So it is a proactive safety system that protects drivers in real time. So we have the best fatigue and distraction algorithms that are out there, and it's not just the box in the cab that does all the work. We also have our real human monitoring and that fatigue intervention that comes after that, and all of that contributes to the results that we get. We use AI, we'll train AI algorithms to be able to monitor drivers' attentiveness. As I said, we detect driver fatigue and distraction, and we provide those real-time in-cab alerts as well as notifying the fleet managers when an event has happened. From a hardware perspective, there's 3 parts to the system. So we have the in-cab sensor, in this case the Guardian Gen 3, forward-facing camera and a vibration motor, and all of those are sort of critical in terms of being able to provide us with the information that we need to alert the drivers. Sort of moving into the active fatigue management space. So when you look at the steps or the hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds that lead up to a crash and what happens monitoring systems, those minutes and seconds beforehand, that the driver's having a microsleep and you wake them up and bring them back to normal driving. You detect that they're distracted, again, bring them back to normal driving. But what we want to do is extend that out. We want to be able to make changes to that driver's behaviour hours, days, weeks before that event potentially could happen, and stop it from happening. And as Charles touched on with the drowsy detection algorithm, we're providing an in-cab alert that's sort of extending sort of many minutes out ahead before something happens. But really the goal is to stop the driver from having these events in the first place. My preference would be that the Guardian system never alerts, because the drivers never have events that we need to bring them back for. Cool. So how we do that, there's sort of three parts to that. So the first is the in-vehicle system that provides the real-time alerts, and we have it detects the events and then it alerts for that. But it's not just about having a box that beeps when it detects that the driver's had their eyes closed. You need very accurate and precise algorithms so that the drivers trust the system and they know that when it's gone off, it's been for a genuine purpose, and then they don't get inundated with lots of noise. But also that the alerts that they're provided, the HMI aspect of that, is appropriate for what they've been detected for to then promote change. Because again, the algorithm might be accurate, but then the alert's super annoying, or it doesn't achieve what it's supposed to do, which is why we have the haptic alert for the microsleep events to help make that change happen with that driver behaviour. So that's critically important, because that then also gives you accurate data when you want to analyse that later. We then have the Guardian Centre, which analyses all of the events that come through, and they review those, and then if there's action needs to be initiated from a fatigue event, then we initiate that fatigue intervention plan with that customer. And again, this helps reduce the noise, because once those events are confirmed and we notify the fleet operator, they know that they need to act on that, or they know it's a real event. They don't have to declutter that noise themselves. And again, it allows for better decision making and easier decision making for those customers. And then the final part of that is the Guardian Live with the reporting and data and the education that can come from that, which is what Charles has effectively used to provide all of that information around changes in driver behaviour, being able to identify drivers that are having issues and things like that. So all three of those are really, really critical, because if you then have a system that is accurate in terms of the alerting algorithm and has the appropriate alert activated, at Seeing Machines we did a study in 2017, or sorry, Monash University did a study in 2017, where they showed that with those two things alone, you can achieve a 66% change in driver behaviour. The moment you bring in the human review and then that fatigue intervention plan, so that jumps to 94%. And that's really because drivers can still potentially ignore something in the cab that might be beeping, but when they get a call from their supervisor, that's a bit harder for them to ignore, and they tend to respond to that. So as Charles talked about, our fatigue detection is based on the Karolinska sleepiness scale, and it is continuously monitoring that driver's drowsiness level or their cognitive state, and we monitor that level up and down from 1 up to 7 or 8, and then it intervenes when they go from that 7 to 8, or if they get even further and have a micro sleep. Obviously, we then have our more dramatic alert, that visual, audio, and haptic. In Guardian Live as well, if the driver's fatigue level goes up to above 7 to 8, it also highlights that in real time, so that from a fleet manager perspective, you can actually see what's happening with your drivers in terms of their the impairment in one sort of area. So our drowsy algorithm, we just have a very simple visual alert and an audible tone. The icon on the display goes to that droopy white eye icon, and it stays there while the system believes that the driver is drowsy. So it's just a reminder for them that they need to do something. It's designed to just let them know, 10, 15, 20 minutes before that they're potentially going to have a micro sleep, that they need to take some behaviour. As Charles mentioned, the Guardian Gen 3 drowsy algorithm complies with the EU GSR for DDoR, and we have bus and truck OEMs in Europe that are using Guardian Gen 3 to comply with that regulation so that they can homologate and sell their vehicles. So it's been proven in the field that it actually meets that regulation. It's been tested against that. If the driver does continue on and they have a micro sleep, then we have our fairly aggressive micro sleep alert. So that's the visual icon changes to that red closed eye. The audible tone's very loud, and we also have the vibration alert to shake the seat to have that quicker reaction from the driver to bring them back to normal. And it is designed to wake the driver up. The drowsy alert's just like a tap on the shoulder to say, hey, you might be getting drowsy, but the micro alert is there to wake them up. And the other thing that we do too is we actually use both algorithms together to help minimize that noise in the cab from a false positive perspective. We can actually set a minimum drowsy level before we alert from micro sleeps. Happens to close their eyes because ringing or whatever it might be, that the system won't alert. It's not just looking for straight eye closure now. We're also combining that with the drowsy to provide a better outcome for the drivers in terms of reducing those false positives. With distraction, which is also quite important to deal with, and you can actually do sort of, I guess, active distraction management as well. With the Guardian Gen 3 looks at eye gaze tracking, and it's incredibly precise in terms of the capability for that. So, I touched earlier on air traffic controllers. So the algorithm's accurate enough to see where an air traffic controller is looking on a screen to see if they've noticed that aircraft has entered their sphere of control. Like, it is very precise, and it does comply with the new GSR that for distraction in Europe. And again, we have bus and truck OEMs using Guardian Gen 3 to meet that requirement, both A-door and D-door, to be able to homologate and sell their vehicles in Europe. So we have two distractions that we alert for. So one is long glance away, which people are probably most familiar with, which is just if you look off road for 4 seconds, the system will alert. We have a new one, which we call attention sharing, but it's based on a Euro NCAP protocol called VAT, so visual attention time sharing. And our algorithm complies with that protocol. And basically, that's where you're splitting your attention between the driving task and something else. And so over a 30-second period, if you look off-road for a total time of 10 seconds, and that can be 1 second here, 1.5 seconds there, 2 seconds, half a second. We just accumulate that time, and if you hit 10 seconds, we will trigger a distraction event. And where we're seeing most of those events come through, because we get a lot more of those than long glance away, is phone use is a big one, and we all do it when we're glancing between the phone and the road. Could be looking at the radio, you might be eating, you could be playing something on the front seat of the car, but it's this algorithm is incredibly precise, so the results we're seeing from it are incredibly high, and to the point that when we released it, we split the alerts between half the fleets had no alerts, the other half did. The fleets without alerts were seeing over 2 events an hour, and the fleets with the alerts were seeing 0.1 events per hour. So again, it comes from having a system that has appropriate detection and alerting strategies. You can really reduce the number of events that are being detected. The sort of the final piece of the puzzle is the data that you can get from the system, because we provide time, location, duration of the events, how long did the events last for, how much kilometres did they travel during the event, and things like that. And then from a driver perspective, as Charles pointed out, you can see which drivers are having more events than others, whether especially from a fatigue perspective, and then work with those drivers to understand what the cause is there health issues, is there something else, and be able to address those to then eliminate those events going forward. From a fleet perspective, and there's 2 graphs there, which you don't need to see the numbers of, but the top one is the time of day that they're getting, these customers getting fatigue events, and the bottom one was the day of the week they're getting fatigue events. So they can start to look at trends of, man, we're getting a lot of fatigue events on a Saturday, what's happening on Friday night for some of our drivers, or we're having a lot of events at 3 o'clock in the morning and things like that. So then you can start to look from an operations and policy perspective of what can we do to change the way we operate to give our drivers the best opportunity to be the best they can be and not have those events happen because we've created an environment where they're going to get tired at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning all the time. The map in the middle is heat maps are always very useful. The one in the middle is all of the events that we've detected in New Zealand over the last 12 months. So again, not just looking at time of day or day of week, you can actually look at, are events happening on certain stages of roads? Are there roads that are more boring than others? And again, implementing policy to ask drivers to change things up. So what's happening in the future? So what are we looking at going forward? The first one would be alcohol impairment detection, and we were recently in the US with a group called MAD, so Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, showing a system in a vehicle that can help detect alcohol impairment. The extension from that is just overall impairment detection. Doesn't really care. We don't really care what's causing the impairment. To be fair, if a driver's impaired, they're impaired. So it could be drug, could be alcohol, could be cognitive, could be other things. Looking at health monitoring and alerting, so we can look at respiratory rate, heart rate, body temperature. You look at how drivers are changing over time, but also helping to try and predict if a driver may have an event. Again, just trying to extend that time out before something happens to allow for action to be taken. We can look at moods, or if you're happy, sad, smiling, laughing. And again, on its own, it's not necessarily useful, but in conjunction with other metrics that we can get from a driver, it can help us to understand what that driver is feeling or how they might be behaving. Obviously, we want to get to driver scoring and combining all that impairment information with actual driving information and behaviour, and also smarter alerting. Again, trying to reduce false positives, because there are still outliers of driver behaviour which is normal, but our system thinks it might be a distraction event or some other event that's coming up. Just to sort of close the loop again, so the goal is to bring use a high quality in-cab system with really good data and all of the effort that Charles talked about in terms of getting into analysing what's going on, looking at policy of organisations to not just be reactive in terms of when something happens, we bring the driver back to normal driving behaviour, but working in those hours, days, weeks, whatever it might be beforehand to do what we can to stop the driver from having the events in the first place. And some of that's just through the vehicle in-cab system and the driver, but a lot of it can be done through organisations working with their drivers, updating policies, looking at overall health of their team as well, to be able to eliminate those events. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Again, some really useful information there in terms of what's there currently, but also what is coming through as well in the future. So thanks for that. If you've got a question or anything like that for any of the speakers, just a reminder to put them in the Q&A spot, and we will put those through during the panel discussion at the end. But we'll move on to our next speaker now as well. So our final speaker for today is Katrina Aubrey, and Katrina is a registered clinical sleep and respiratory physiologist technician with more than 23 years of experience across a wide range of medical and surgical fields. She specialises in sleep science and its critical role in managing fatigue, particularly within 24/7 operations and organisations working under the Health and Safety at Work Act. And Katrina works closely with New Zealand's transport sector, helping teams strengthen fatigue risk management and supporting the diagnosis and treatment of sleep disorders. She's passionate about improving quality of life, lifting awareness, and ensuring people are genuinely fit for work. So it's great to have you here today, Katrina, to tell us some more about the importance of driver health and well-being as part of fatigue management as well. So thanks for being here.
Kia ora. Good afternoon, everybody. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. In this short session, I want to highlight the direct connection between fatigue and your quality and quantity of sleep, whether you're getting the right amount or not, and why understanding this link is going to be crucial for long-term health, well-being, and safe performance on the road. So fatigue is one of the biggest risks in driving, but also one of the most predictable. And in many cases, fatigue isn't something we can see like a flat tyre or an uneven load, but we can detect it early and then manage it before it leads to an incident. So to understand the key elements of fatigue, you need to understand the biology of fatigue. And fatigue is driven by two main drivers that are going to work together to control how alert or tired you might feel. So our first main driver is our circadian rhythm, or our body clock, and it's a hardwired 24-hour internal clock that is going to regulate when you're naturally feeling awake or sleepy. And this is going to be guided by light, darkness, and your daily routine. So we were designed to be diurnal, which means we are designed to be alert during the light of the day and then reduce our alertness at night. So with our body clock, we typically reach our peak alertness at around 5 p.m. And then at 5 a.m., we're going to experience that window of circadian low where reaction time, alertness, and decision-making is all dropping between the hours of 2 and 6. For any of you shift workers out there, I used to be a shift worker, you may recognise the sun up effect. As daylight increases and you've head home from night shift, you're extremely tired. But with the sunlight, your body briefly boosts alertness. And so even though you're sleep deprived, you all of a sudden find a next level of energy to do the washing or go do grocery shopping or whatever it may be that you need to do at home, which is not always ideal when we need to get a good amount of sleep. Now, our second drive for sleep is going to be our sleep pressure or our homeostatic drive. And you can see by the peaks here that from the moment you're awake, we start to build a natural chemical called adenosine. And the only way to burn off this sleepy adenosine feeling is by sleeping. And by sleeping, you metabolize this adenosine, and then you should wake after a good 7.5 hours of sleep feeling refreshed and alert. So there is that direct connection between your sleep and your fatigue. So what is happening during your sleep that is going to be very crucial in the way that you are working safely or driving safely? Sleep isn't passive downtime. It's actually one of our most active biological processes that we have. And it wasn't so long ago, it was believed that the only reason why we slept was to burn off that sleep pressure. But modern sleep science has shown us that there is a lot that's happening in our sleep. And a saying I like to use is, good sleep is good health and bad sleep is bad health. And that's for all levels of your health, your physical, your mental, and your cognitive health. So I don't have time to go into exactly everything that's happening, but sleep is going to reset your brain to clear out the mental clutter. It was going to, balance your mood and emotional reactions. And it's also going to strengthen your immunity and just keep that body clock running on time. And I love that famous quote by Benjamin Franklin, "There'll be plenty of time to sleep when you're dead." Well, modern science now shows the opposite is true. I like to now use, the shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. So a real world experiment is happening twice a year with sleep and our cardiac health. Each daylight savings time, the clock change will affect 1.6 billion people across 70 countries, and we see clear shifts in heart attacks rising. So you can see in spring, when we're losing that hour of sleep, on the following day, there is a 24% increase in heart attacks and strokes. And then what we now see in autumn, when a lot of us will gain that hour back, on the Monday, we then see a 21% reduction in those same profiles. And so this really proves just how sensitive the cardiovascular system is to even small changes in sleep, and reinforces that protecting your sleep opportunity and circadian alignment isn't just a nice to have, it's actually a genuine health and safety lever. I'm going to give you another reason why we need to be sleeping, and you need to be getting good consistency of your sleep. Some people tell me that they function fine on 4 hours of sleep and it's just become their normal. They almost tell me like, that's it, I'm the best thing ever, I've only had 4 hours of sleep. But during a particular stage of sleep, we release these little blue guys called a natural killer cell. And their sole purpose is to locate, target, and then destroy cancer before it becomes cancer. It could be COVID before it becomes COVID. So with this research, we've found that with only 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night or a day for you shift workers, your immune system is going to take a major hit. These natural killer cells, which is your body's frontline in defense, is going to have a drop for up to 70% from one short night alone. And so we know that the World Health Organization has classified certain types of shift work, especially your night shift, that disrupt your circadian rhythm as a probable carcinogen. And this is where it's coming from. We know shift workers typically lose 1 to 4 hours of sleep every 24 hours compared to us day shift workers. And we know also with that sleep loss, there's going to be sleep is going to be lighter and more broken. So sleep isn't one long uniform state. It's going to move with 4 stages of sleep, and you need at least 7 hours of sleep to get the 4 to 6 cycles of those 4 stages. Each stage is going to last between 90 and 110 minutes. So I'll glide through these quite quickly. I've only got my 15 minutes. So your first stage of sleep is typically where we'll see those micro sleeps in the Guardian, or those sleeps when you've fallen asleep on the couch after work and a family member has woken you up telling you that you're no longer watching the news. I mean, you will swear black and blue you are still watching the news, just as our clients often believe that the Guardian did not detect a true micro sleep. You'll find at this time you could potentially get a hypnic jerk, usually from a sign of sleep deprivation, but it's that feeling like you're falling off a cliff motion as you're falling off to sleep. Now, in our non-rapid eye movement 2 or our non-REM 2 stage, which is our light sleep, you will find that your heart rate and breathing starts to slow down, which in doing that starts to cool your blood temperature and your body temperature. And then at this stage of sleep, we're going to have memory consolidation. Now, we're going to spend 50% of our time overall in this stage of still considered light sleep, but it's really important we spend this much time in this stage of sleep because we're shifting all the short-term memory of today, and we're going to press the save button as a long-term memory tonight. Now, our non-rapid eye movement 3 stage is our beautiful deep sleep. It is going to be critical for these natural killer cells that I spoke about to come out. So they're only going to come out at this stage of sleep to locate, target, and destroy the cancer and the viruses and the sickness. You may find that if your alarm clock goes off to this stage of sleep, or you sleep longer than the 26-minute NASA nap for your fatigue countermeasure, you may find that you're going to, or you will find, sorry, that you'll get the sleep inertia. So that sleep inertia is that groggy, disoriented feeling where you need actually sometimes up to an hour to fully awake properly. And then the last stage of sleep, there is your rapid eye movement. Your brain's going to become very active at this stage of the night. So you should have atonia. Atonia is a paralyzation so you don't act out your dreams. The other importance of this stage of sleep, which you're only going to get 20% of this time in this stage of sleep, is going to take the emotional sharpness out of any stress that you may be having. So it could be a separation of a partnership. It could be the death of a loved one. It's really important that you're getting enough hours of sleep and the right quality of sleep so you can help with that stress along the way of your REM. So as you can see from this slide, fatigue comes from a mix of work-related and lifestyle pressures. You will find, particularly the first one there, is your sleep debt. If you're one of the 37% of Kiwi and the same percentage for Aussies that are only getting 6 hours of sleep, you're going to start to accumulate a sleep debt. Even losing 1 hour a night across a week will create a measurable decline in your alertness, your reaction time, and your emotional regulation. And you can see some other causes there. It may be your shift work, which is the night shifts and early morning starts. Very sensitive to fatigue. We need to use fatigue countermeasures, and obviously Charles has covered some of those already. From the time of being awake of 16 hours, you begin to experience fatigue, and you're going to function similar to that of that breath alcohol content of 0.05. And then there with our time on task, anything that's monotonous or repetitious, you will find even if you're well rested, you'll find that you're still going to be quite sensitive to fatigue there. So using some fatigue countermeasures are going to be the opposite of what you're seeing with the white boxes. You obviously want to have great nutrition that will make or break your fatigue. And hydration is super important as well with keeping that cognitive function. And of course, we've got the sleep disorders, especially undiagnosed sleep apnea. there's going to be huge persistent fatigue in the transport sector there as we try to bring some education and awareness around all these sleep disorders that are out there. And so some more common sleep disorders I deal with on a day-to-day basis are these 5 here. Many drivers experience fatigue because of an underlying sleep disorder, not because they're not trying hard enough to mitigate their fatigue, or not because they're not getting the recommended 7+ hours of sleep. If the quality of sleep is disrupted by sleep apnea or by a restless leg or your shift work disorder, you can still wake up unrefreshed, and it doesn't matter if you even had 10 hours of sleep. What is also common is waking up your normal with a sleep disorder, and again, not understanding that there's anything particularly wrong with your sleep quality itself. So in brief, obstructive sleep apnea, or OSA, is going to be caused by repeated airway collapse. You're going to drop your oxygen. It's going to fragment your sleep, and I like to call it, sleep suffocation. And then we've got the parasomnias, the restless leg, and insomnia. They're all going to affect your sleep quality, the timing, and obviously the sleep consolidation. Apologies for that. And the last one there is the shift work disorder, where you're having a misalignment between your body clock and the roster pattern itself. And so the important part of this is all of these are treatable, and early screening makes the biggest of difference. And you may be getting your 7+ of the non-negotiable hours of sleep, but is your sleep of good quality? Again, you may have some sleep disorders that we've just spoken about, and we can sort of test and treat. But what are you doing in your everyday routine that could be affecting your quality? So sleep hygiene is simply signals and habits that you prepare your body for sleep, and the cues that you give your brain in the morning through to the evening will actually determine how easily your sleep happens when you finally do lay down. Our brains are still going to behave like we're in a cave. You need to use light, temperature, movement, and routine to decide when it's safe to switch down, and when it's not safe to switch off or switch down, you need to be going the opposite with those cave signals. So using the daylight during the day to keep you alert, and then obviously start to reduce the light at night to start to cool down your body, and also to let your body know that it's okay and it's going to be quite safe to have a sleep. So in closing, I guess fatigue is biological, not personal, when it comes to understanding how your brain works, and protecting both the quality and quantity of sleep will actually help as well, understanding with your education that you may need around sleep disorders and your sleep hygiene. We need to protect our sleep, we need to protect our performance, and obviously the health and safety of everyone on the road.
Great. Thanks very much for that, Katrina. I really appreciate you being part of it. And to all of our speakers today, I appreciate we've not been able to dive into everything today. It's been of an overview, but hopefully that's provided you all with some useful information. And now we do have some time for a few minutes of Q&A. So if I can also invite Charles and Michael to join us again as well in terms of their videos and microphones, that would be great. If you do have a question for any of the speakers or for all of them, please feel free to put that through in the Q&A, and we have got a couple of minutes there. So I do have one question through on that, which is for you, Michael.
Yeah.
Asking what monitoring solution you use to make sure that your system works properly at those highly critical moments.
Yeah, I'll cover the whole everything, just in case I'm not sure what particular. So the Guardian Gen 3 has been designed and built by Seeing Machines specifically for us. So we designed and developed that specifically to suit our algorithms, and all of our algorithms are developed ourselves. So that's all. So the in-cab technology from a Guardian Gen 3 perspective is all ours and developed by us. In terms of how we train those algorithms, so we've developed a lot of data over the 25 years that we've been around. It's basically made up of thousands of known events that we compare the algorithms to and train them against before we then push them into the unit. So we know We have a good idea of the percentage of true events that we detect and how many we may miss. All systems will miss some true events, but we obviously work to minimise that as much as possible. But we also have thousands of hours of naturalistic driving that we put the algorithms through to as well, so we can see what the performance of the algorithms are in real life driving situations without impacting any of our customers. This is sort of, again, data that we've collected over time. So our philosophy is always to err on the side at the cost of potentially having some more false positives. So I think Charles talked about waking up 54 drivers a day, whatever it might be. So if your system is slightly conservative and not getting as many true events, then the reality is that you might only be waking 50 drivers up a day, right? So there's 2 drivers that aren't getting those wake up alerts. So we are on the side of caution of trying to detect as many true events as possible as we can, and with that comes some false positives. But yeah, so everything is ours, our technology, and we have dollars worth of data to use to train those algorithms.
Great, thank you, Michael. That was really helpful there. Question, Charles, for you around when you're working with various fleets, how have you found that, what measures have they taken to help get driver buy-in to having technology in the vehicles and having all of these things in place?
Look, yeah, thanks, Karen. I think one of the key components, as both Mike and Katrina said, is, very often with sleep events, you'll actually, the point of is that the driver is in a real state of impairment and often doesn't actually know that it's happening to them. So having a really good program of education and knowledge, and also sharing what we're seeing. Very often we find, people will watch the video, they'll ring the driver and say, hey, you just fell asleep. They say, no, I didn't, but they never actually share the video. So that's a very important component. One of the ones that we find really useful is introducing family of the driver to the technology as well, and saying, is this something that you would like your loved one to have protecting them during the time? But then we do a lot of work, and Kat certainly does a lot of work going around the country holding seminars with companies and people, talking to the drivers. We'll often find that the drivers all sit on the very back seats in the room to start with, but by the end they're generally, at least a quarter of them are coming up to Kat and going, oh, actually that sounds like me, and can you help me? So I think it's that all-round thing. It's not just a big brother in the cab. It is actually there to assist you. And I think some of the future functions that Wal talked about in terms of being able to pick up some of those health type things, etc., is going to be really helpful in that space as well. If we can actually save people from or identify early heart or cardiac conditions, strokes, all those sorts of things, that's just going to add to the positive spin of the whole program.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Charles. I'm conscious of the time, but there's 2 more quick questions. I'll just go through those, if that's okay for all of you to stay a couple more minutes. Be great. I've just had one question through, which is, are there portable or personal systems that can be used, for example, with rental vehicles or in personal vehicles?
Yeah, look, I'll grab that one. It is, we have a number of people that have a little case that they take when they jump into a rental car. There's also a number of companies I know that have vehicles that work seasonally, a number of pea harvesters and those sorts of things. So we actually make up kits that get put in and uninstalled. Look, like any of those things, it's not 100% ideal, because the cameras do need to be set up in a generally specific way, but it still works pretty well in that space.
Thanks, Charles. Anything you wanted to add to that, Michael?
Yeah, sorry. No, Charles has obviously been able to package stuff together from a Seeing Machines out of the box. It's not something that we do, but it is something that I would like us to look at in the future. And to Charles's point, I don't think it would be a replacement necessarily for the proper in-cab units that we have, but it would serve a purpose in those sort of really temporary situations, or even similar to what Kat does in terms of sending people home for an overnight sleep study. It might be enough to identify that there are some problems and help with that decision going forward.
Thanks. And a question for you, Kat, is around really interesting information about how we're affected in terms of our sleep and all of the fantastic work that our body does while we are asleep. Does that change at different ages? So, for example, where you've got younger drivers in your organisation and older drivers in your organisation, might there be differences at different stages of life as well to consider?
Yeah, really good question. So sleep hours change up until being an 18-year-old adult, in which case even up to our 60s, early 70s, research is showing that we still need our 7+ hours. The difference that we find is reaching around the 60 mark, our sleep does become more fragmented, which can mean it's a little bit harder to stay asleep for that chunk of time. And you may turn into possibly a shift worker where you may only get 5 hours at the first half of your sleep. And then you'll find you may have to return back for another 2-hour nap, as I sort of recommend to some of our shift workers that may not be able to get that block of sleep. So it's certainly harder from about 60 to get that good amount of non-fragmented sleep. But it is still really important we get the same amount of hours.
Great, thank you for that. That's really useful information too. I'm conscious, I know you could all talk about this for a long time, and I find it really interesting as well, but we have gone slightly over time, so we'll wrap up there. But thank you all for your contributions today. Really appreciate it. And as promised, I'm just going to share my screen again quickly just to wrap up with a couple of our other forthcoming activities that we have. So this is our last webinar of the year, but we will have more happening next year, which will be online soon. We are, however, holding our last event of the year next Friday, which is the Road Safety Forum with the Australasian College of Road Safety. It's in Auckland, but online attendance is also available. And that event is covering a range of topics related to road safety, relevant to road safety professionals, health and safety professionals, emergency services, and others. For more details, go to the Global Fleet Champions website, and all of the information is on there. And as I mentioned, we coordinate National Road Safety Week each May. That may seem like a long way off, but we are already planning next year's event. So it takes place the 4th to the 10th of May with the theme Be a Road Safety Hero. And you can go to the website now to sign up, ready to receive the free resources when they come out in March. So just head to the Road Safety Week website for more details there. Break is a charity, as many of you know, and as such we rely on donations, fundraisers, and our corporate supporters like AutoSense to help us to continue our work. So if you are able to help us in some way, or you'd like to have a conversation with me about different opportunities for working with us, please get in contact there. If you'd like to, we also have next Tuesday, that it's Giving Tuesday, and that's a worldwide thing. So we've got Black Friday, we have Cyber Monday, we also have Giving Tuesday, which is all about charities. So that is coming up next Tuesday. Give a Little are doing something where they are waiving all of their admin fees for charities for all donations that are taken next Tuesday. So whether you support Break, whether you support other charities in that space, next Tuesday is a great day to donate for the holiday season to a charity of your choice through Give a Little, and they will waive their admin fees, and the full donation will be going to charities on that day. So that's just a heads up on that one for any charity that you might be supporting. And we also have a holiday fundraiser this year, which is our Tree of Remembrance linked to the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. So if you'd like to add a ribbon in memory of someone or of all those who've been affected by crashes and donate to Break, you can go to our Visu Fund Tree of Remembrance and do that for the holiday season. So I hope you found today's webinar useful and interesting. Thank you again to our speakers today, and especially to our sponsors, AutoSense, and to all of you for taking part. We hope to see you at another webinar again soon.